So here we are again, we are back for another power rankings. We've done the supports, we've done the tanks, it's now time to do the DPS. And DPS tend to be the role that takes the limelight these days in Overwatch. There were times when we didn't have any DPS at the top level of Overwatch, you know, remember goats, anyone? But now we are in 2-2-2 Rollock, so we see the pop-offs once again for the DPS stars of 2020 and 2021 coming up. And it's going to be interesting. Once again, Los Angeles Valiant, you are excluded from these power rankings because you don't have a team, because you decided to do what you did. You're still on the naughty step, and you're not going to get away from that for a very long time, not in my books anyway, if ever. So, we have 19 teams to go through. We're going to start off from bottom to top as per usual, and again, these are my opinions alone. You feel free to have your own opinions in the comments below, and obviously, these are subject to change. You know, if people pick up different players, it can have an impact on where these teams finish and where they are in these rankings. And also, these teams could exceed, or they could do a lot worse than what I'm predicting here. So, who knows what we're going to see from these teams when the season actually starts, but this is what we've got on paper, and what we have from what we knew from their previous outings, whether that be in Contenders, or whether that be in the Overwatch League. Anyway, in 19th, I have put the Vancouver Titans. They tend to be around the bottom of the league in every single one of these power rankings because they don't really pop off in any area. Dalton was consistent last season, but he was consistently mediocre, so that's not great. They lost Shockwave. I think we all expected that. Shockwave was a massive standout figure for the Vancouver Titans. However, I do think their DPS are decent. I think the DPS is the best part of this team. But it's not saying much. I mean, it's Linksa and Teru, right? Teru, I think he could be he's looking like if anyone's going to break through out of this Vancouver Titans squad, it's going to be Teru. But again, it's a long shot. Linksa, he's coming in from Houston. Linksa is inconsistent in my opinion. He can have his very high moments, he can be just non-existent at times. And I think that's a major part of the reason that he's just not at Houston anymore. I think Linksa will be okay, and possibly the best DPS player on the squad, but he's not a player they can rely on, in my opinion. And he's not going to be a player to take the Vancouver Titans up to 12th spot in the league or something silly like that. It's just not going to happen. He's not a carry. I don't believe he's carry potential anymore. And so that's why I rate the Vancouver Titans DPS quite so low. Just above them in 18th, I'm going to put the Paris Eternal. And the reason I put the Paris Eternal here is I think they could do a lot better than where they are placed. I do think they're heavily reliant on who I would regard as the two starting DPS players for the Eternal, so that would be the Flex DPS Naga, who's coming in from Obey Alliance, and the Hitscan Onigod, who was with Dallas Fuel, but he did not get to demonstrate how good he was at the Dallas Fuel. No one really got to demonstrate how good they were at the Dallas Fuel, because it's Dallas Fuel. And then we got Suna. Suna, in my opinion, definitely a backup or a very niche pick at times. Suna was on Vancouver last year. He didn't stand out at all. He's a bit of depth for the Paris Eternal, but I really do think they're going to be starting with Naga and Onigod. I think that can be a good DPS line. I think it could actually massively overachieve for the Eternal. But I do think it will be dragged down by the rest of the teams. That's why I think they'll end up quite low in the rankings. But it's definitely the bright part of this Paris Eternal squad. However, when we look at it going up against the rest of the teams in the league, and especially the teams in the lower half of the league, we start to think, is it going to get drowned out by a lot of quality in the DPS department? When you look at the likes of Houston Outlaws and Uprising, they've made improvements to their DPS line, or they've made additions to their DPS line, and it's going to start meaning that Paris are like, you've made improvements. Well, not improvements. I mean, you lost Spark or people like that. So, but you've done better than we expected. Like, I was expecting this Paris Eternal squad to not be good. This is a decent Eternal squad. But when you put it up against a lot of the other teams, it's like, is it going to be enough? Is it going to be enough? And I don't think it is. So that's why Paris are actually quite low. And it's a little bit harsh on the DPS themselves, I think, but the quality is so high in the Overwatch League that they tend to get drowned out. So just above the Eternal, we have their European neighbours, the Spitfire. Now, originally I was going to put the Spitfire below the Eternal, because I thought the Spitfire lacked in the DPS compared to the Eternal, but then the Spitfire signed Shax, and so I have given them the benefit of the doubt. Now, Spitfire, I think, arguably, the DPS is the most iffy part of the team, but it does have a lot of quality to it. So, let's start off with the most recent signing, Shax. I think Shax coming in is really, really cool. I think they really needed that extra bit of versatility. Blase was the first DPS to come in. We had a lot of question marks over it. He hasn't really done anything in the league, but he's done very well in tryouts, apparently. So, we're going to give him the benefit of the doubt there. Sparker is now a two-way between the Spitfire and Hurricane, because he won't be eligible at the start of the season. But when he comes in, he was really good in contenders, so we will see how he does. Very similar to Naga, except a slightly different DPS role. And then we have Hybrid, who's also another similar situation. Nice hit scan player with him also almost certainly being the Echo player for the Spitfire, if that comes up. The only British influence on the team. And he looked great for Team Doge when he played for them. So I think it's an okay one, but again, it's very similar to the Eternal, where when you pit it up against the rest of what you see, it starts to just fall down your expectations. And that's kind of what happens when you've got so many stacked players. Anyway, just above them in 16th, I put the Boston Uprising. Boston Uprising, tale of two halves, right? You've got I'm 37, soon Valentine, and Color Hex. Color Hex, meh. Color Hex is just meh. He was not great last year, was he? And I'm very glad that they brought in Valentine, because otherwise Boston would be below the two European teams, that's for sure. I still think there's a lot of questions, but Valentine is a great addition, and I'm 37 is contenders winner alongside him in last year for WGS Phoenix, and soon it brings a lot of experience to go with Fusion's already built experience, and I don't know how Boston will line up. With Laurie as head coach, I wouldn't be surprised if they line up with I'm 37 and Valentine. There's question marks over I'm 37 because he's been in the league before and not done too much. So it'll be interesting to see what he does there, but he deserves another chance. Valentine is unknown, depends on how he performs in the league. They can't really rely on Color Hex, but soon is going to be a good, definitely a good option at the hit scan role as well. So I think Boston are okay, but again, nothing too special, if I was to put it that way. So Outlaws in 15th. Outlaws, they've got some potential. Like Dante, they've held on to him, which is really, really good. Hydration back in the DPS role now. KSF coming in from the Valiant. KSF, I don't think is going to play too much for the Outlaws because I think there's too much quality. And you got Jake coming back. I don't expect Jake to play too much unless we get a Junkrat meta, I'm going to be perfectly honest, or Soldier 76. But then they brought in Happy from Guangzhou Charge. I think Happy is really good. Really good hit scan player. He's going to go in the duels and he's probably going to win them for the Outlaws a lot of the time against the teams around them. But again, it's not going to push the Outlaws right up to the upper echelons of the league. So the Outlaws, they've got 5 DPS players and I don't know why. I really don't. KSF and Jake just don't make any sense to me. I mean, Jake makes sense from a PR point of view, but KSF doesn't. I don't see playtime for KSF with Hydration back on the DPS role. I can understand if Hydration's a full flex player. And Dante and Happy, I could see them two working out really well in certain metas. But again, I think Houston might be a little bit meta dependent unless Hydration really comes back in full force in that DPS role, especially on those flex heroes. Anyway, just above the Outlaws, we had the Atlanta Reign. The Reign, I'm going purely off the quality of their players here, not the coaching that's going to come alongside them, because again, we're judging them by players. Kai, Edison, and Pelican. On paper, we're looking at a really good DPS line there. I think last year, Atlanta Reign's DPS got let down by the coaching staff, and I think Sharp got let down as well. Kai proved himself at the Los Angeles Valiant last year, as KSP back then, and I think he will be great. Will he get too much playtime? I don't know. Pelican's a great addition alongside Edison. Edison was already very consistent. I think Atlanta Reign have got a DPS line that can keep in middle of the pack. But I think it will lag behind some of the other teams slightly, because now we're starting to hit the teams that have actually got some really nice DPS in them. So Reign has started, they sort of strike me as perhaps gatekeepers between bottom of the league DPS and then like the actual DPS that can really pop off and really be special at times. That's what I'm seeing the Reign as, because in the 13th I've got the Guangzhou Charge, and the Guangzhou Charge might be a little bit low, if I'm perfectly honest. So when we look at the Charge, we're looking at a team that has got a lot of quality. You got Mike Haley, you got Eileen, and Choicer One. Now, in the next cut, we saw Choicer One for the first time. What worries me about Choicer One is that he tends to push the Genji pick a lot, which is not going to work out in the long term unless we see a Genji meta. So I don't like that. They've managed to retain Eileen. Eileen is a great player for the Guangzhou Charge, and I'm glad to see him back on the roster for this 2021 season. Mike Haley, he looked okay. He looked okay for Guangzhou. Is he going to be phenomenal? I don't think so. It'll be interesting to see quite how this works. Choicer One on the Echo and the Genji, though, was promising when we saw him. But I do wonder if that forcing of the Genji at times might cost the Guangzhou Charge in the long term, and that's why they're a slight bit lower. 12th, we have the Hangzhou Spark. This may be low. And I think a lot of people will question why Spark are so low, considering they got Shy, Godspeed, Architect, and So Min-soo. So Min-soo, I have questions about how good he will be coming back to the league. That's a question I have. Godspeed, he's fairly consistent, but again, you're challenging a lot of really great DPS players when you get into this level. Architect, he was with Hangzhou at the end of last season, and to be quite honest, he didn't impress me too much coming over from the shock. So I think it'll be really heavily down to coaches to get the best out of Architect. Shy, though, I do think will be a shining light for the Hangzhou Spark coming out from contenders, and I think he's actually a really great pickup. Very versatile DPS line for the Hangzhou Spark, but is it a good in every trade but master of none? That's what I worry about the Hangzhou Spark and their DPS. And if you're a master in none, you're often going to find yourself middle of the pack. So next up then we have the Chengdu Hunters. And the Chengdu Hunters, I think there's a lot of potential in the DPS line of the Chengdu Hunters. Now, they've kept hold of leaving Jinmu that they already had, and I think that's actually vital, because Jinmu obviously has incredible potential, pop-off potential. He always has done, and so has Leave. So I think that's good hold-ons by the Chengdu Hunters. And to add to them, they've made 4 DPS players, including Jinmu and Leave, and that's Jimmy and Kaneki coming in. So I think these two actually have a lot of potential to be really good this year. Jimmy comes in as a highly rated hit scan player from the Ultra Prime Academy, which used to be the Academy of Guangzhou Charge. And then we also have Kaneki, who's coming in from Team Cat. And Team Cat actually surprised a lot of people in Chinese contenders and did actually quite well. And he was at Cosmos Veritas Gaming before that. And Kaneki actually did quite well for Team Cat when they were a thing in Chinese contenders. And Kaneki's looking like perhaps the Sombra player the Chengdu are going to run this year. And he's also got that Tracer as well. It's very, very interesting. And I think there's a lot of flexibility in this Chengdu Hunters lineup that they've got for their DPS. And I think the reason I've put them above the Spark, and a lot of people will question this, the reason I put them above the Spark is because I think they have more pop-off potential with Leave and Jinmu. And I also think they have more, not willingness is the wrong word, but more to prove. And when it comes to having more to prove, it can really push players on. Jimmy and Kaneki, completely new to the league. Whereas when you look at Hangzhou Spark, Architects, So Min-soo, Godspeed, they're already not old hats, but they have experience in the league. And so they don't have as much to prove. Shy does. But there's more in the Chengdu Hunters. I think they'd be hungrier to do well than the Hangzhou Spark. And I think it's going to drive them to a more impressive results sometimes, I think. But overall, I still think Spark are probably the better team with their tanks and their support. Anyway, moving on. And in the middle of the league, we have the New York Excelsior. Now, New York, they've got Ivy, Flora, Guang Boon, and Feather. I was going to say Fletter. They don't have Fletter, that's for sure. Ivy comes in as the stable old hat from Philadelphia Fusion and Toronto Defiant previously before that. Ivy was fantastic at the Philadelphia Fusion, and I think it's a loss for them in some respects. So I think that's a massive pickup for the New York Excelsior. Flora, Guang Boon, Feather. Now, these more unknown guys come in from a lot of different places. 2 from Contenders Korea and 1 from Contenders China. So we have Guang Boon, who's coming in from Team Cat. Again, Team Cat, another name that's cropped up. And again, he did very well with that team. He's not quite eligible, but he'll be eligible by the time the league comes around. All very young players as well. So this is a definite plan for the future for New York Excelsior. And I think it could actually prove quite fruitful for them. Guang Boon will be the hit scan DPS. They also have another hit scan that's Flora. and he comes in from T-Diamond, but the difference with Flora is he has that Sombra, and a lot of teams like to have a Sombra on board. I like to see a Sombra on board for teams because, you know, Sombra is a very powerful pick in a lot of things, and she can creep into the meta a lot of the time. We also see a lot of Asia-based teams or Eastern-based teams use and utilize that Sombra. That's where NYXL are going to be competing next season, so I think it is good that they have that Sombra pick in their back pocket. Also, Feather, who comes in from Talon Esports, again, another player that's done very well. He's a flex DPS, he's got a great Echo, got a great Mei, got a great Sombra, Genji Farah, etc. So I think the DPS for the NYXL, they have everything covered. I really like it. Very flexible. They don't look like they've got any holes. And I really, really like that when I'm looking at a team, especially in their DPS, because there are some teams higher up in these rankings that aren't necessarily as flexible, but I think they have a higher skill ceiling in their favourable picks, shall we say. So moving on to that, in number 9 we have the Toronto Defiant. The Toronto Defiant, very sink or swim. Now they have great parts in their other roles, like the tanks and the supports. But I think the DPS is where it hinges for the Toronto Defiant. If they do well, Toronto Defiant are going to be a great team. If they don't, then they're gonna struggle a little bit. So the DPS are Logix, Hisu, and Neist. So Logix we already knew. He's one of the only surviving members from the original Toronto Defiant. And Logix can be good. He's not been at great teams, so it's been difficult for him to show his worth. But I do think Logix can be good in the right environment. Although I don't think Logix will be starting because they did sign Hisu from Philadelphia Fusion. I think that's a massive pickup for Toronto Defiant, coming along with KDG. And I really like that pickup. Hisu did start over Carpe at times at Philadelphia Fusion. Hisu's got a lot of great picks in his back pocket. I don't think he showed all he could have. He didn't show his best at Philadelphia Fusion, maybe. But at Toronto Defiant, I think, will be the unarguable starter in that hit scan spot. So I really think he's going to be a very valuable part of this Toronto Defiant. And I think he will be the best DPS player to have. Now we have Neist, who's the flex DPS player for Toronto Defiant. He comes in, he's 18, he's from T1. Now, T1 didn't do massively well in Korea. I mean, they did do well in week 1, and then it was just downhill from there, really. They didn't really do anything else. But Neist was at the Fusion Uni. And Fusion Uni were fantastic back in the day in North America, or was North America East at one point as well. They were dominant, and Neist was a part of that squad. He's got the Sombra, which again we love to see, but he's also got that Tracer. So if we come into a more Tracery, echoey sort of thing, then I think the Toronto Defiant will have it covered. Especially, it'd be interesting to see if they do have an Echo player, because that is one perhaps weird spot for Toronto. I don't see an Echo. Neist might be that Echo with Hisu on the Tracer. It'll be interesting to see how that works out. But I do like that they could run the Tracer and long-range hit scan. That's a very valuable pick in the pocket. And I think a lot of the Toronto Defiant success will be dependent on how good Neist is and how well he does. I think Hisu will be fairly reliable alongside their tanks and their supports. But it'll be interesting to see if that flex DPS Neist will be good. Because if he isn't, I think that will be where they come unstuck and where they miss someone like Ivy. And again, it's not the end of the transfer window yet, so we could see another flex DPS come into Toronto Defiant, but I doubt it somehow. So, moving on, and in 8th I have the Washington Justice. Justice might be a little bit low here, but again, there is a lot of competition. So, I think Justice, they're going to be... It's going to be interesting. Decay is going to be very good. We know Decay can be great. Jerry's going to be good. I don't think Jerry's going to be outstanding, but he was good on a bad team, shall we say, last year at Boston Uprising. Assassin coming in from Runaway. Assassin will be sink or swim. Runaway didn't have the dominant seasons that they've been having previously with other rosters, so Assassin was part of that Runaway that's not quite got there, not quite been at the pinnacle. So it'll be interesting to see if Assassin can really live up to and compete with the flex DPSs that we've got in the league. When you look at the likes of Ivy, Nero now at the Shock, even someone like Naga, can Assassin keep with them? Or will Assassin be an inconsistent flex DPS? Like Tuba. That's what would be worrying, and it moves me on to Tuba, because Tuba is very inconsistent. He had a great end of the season, but most of the season he was not that good. So there's a lot of question marks over the Washington Justice's DPS line. And that's why I don't have confidence to put them higher, because we're starting to get into some real stacked DPS lines here for a lot of teams. So it's going to be super interesting to see how they shape up, but there is a lot of potential for this Washington Justice DPS. And there's a lot of potential for them to be quite high in the league. So again, as I said at the start of the video, it's like there's a lot of caveats and a lot of question marks going into this. But at number 7 we have the Dallas Fuel. Not very high for the Fuel, and the reason for that is the lack of flexibility, I think, in the Fuel. So Fuel complete overhaul. They still got Doha, but they brought an XC and Sparkle. Now, Sparkle, he's great on Genji, he's great on Doomfist, and he's got a decent Pharah as well. What else? His Mei was mediocre last season, in my opinion. Wasn't that good. XC does a lot on the McCree, don't get me wrong. His Widow's okay, his Ashe is okay, but he's a lot on the McCree, and I think he forces the McCree a lot of the time, which could be a bit of a sticking point for Dallas. Doha, he's okay actually, and I thought Doha was going to fill in those spots. But during the next cup, Doha was inconsistent, and it started to throw question marks. And when I look at this Dallas Fuel DPS line, I have one overarching question. Where is the Echo player? Where is the good Echo player? We didn't see a massive amount of Echo from Dallas Fuel during the next cup. And I'm interested to see who's going to be grinding that Echo ahead of the season, because I think that's a big problem for Dallas. And we're looking at a lot of problems in terms of meta flexibility for Dallas Fuel, so it's going to be interesting to see how they do. But that's why they're lower, because I think their lack of flexibility. At 6 we have the Fusion. Fusion, I really think they're a downgrade on last season. They still have Carpe, and what I liked about the Fusion last season was they didn't rely on Carpe. They brought in Hisu, and I thought that was a fantastic pickup, because I thought, okay, they're not relying on Carpe anymore. They can take pressure off of him, they can take the reliance off of him, they've got a nice backup DPS. Hisu actually got a lot of work done for Philly at times last season. Then they lose Hisu, they lose Ivy, they bring in Shockwave, and they still got EQO. EQO, I think he's great. He was great in the Echo meta, and he was great in the Genji meta. But I do think that Philly have gone back to their Season 2, Season 1 days of being extra reliant on Carpe, and I don't like that. I don't like that at all. If we run into a non-hit scan meta, minus Tracer, I think Philly are going to seriously suffer with this lineup. I do. And although they have a great Echo player in Shockwave, I see holes in this Philadelphia Fusion side. EQO wasn't starting last season, now they're going to throw him straight back in. Well, he was starting at times, but most of the time it was Ivy. And I don't know. The new coaching at Philly might change things, but I don't like this over-reliance on Carpe. And I think it might cost them at times. At number 5, we have the Florida Mayhem. I really like the Florida Mayhem. They haven't lost anything, which is really good. Like, they have not lost a single thing. They've still got BQB. They've still got Yaki. 2 great DPS from last season. They really struck up a really nice pairing. And then they've added Checkmate from Mozart Gaming. And I like Checkmate as well. I think Checkmate is a fantastic backup to these guys. Yaki has a fantastic Echo. BQB is great. Has been great on the hit scan. It actually really broke through last year. Really impressive. So I like the Florida Mayhem overall, but I think their DPS are actually really good, and they're backed up by even better supports this year with Slime on the main support. So I think there's a lot of potential for the Florida Mayhem to do very well, and I think it'll be off the back of Yaki and BQB mainly, but Checkmate coming in can really offer them a little bit more spice that they didn't have last season, when, you know, we remember that people like Sire Player weren't around. So I think Florida have only added to their DPS that were already good from last year, and I think they've got a lot of potential to do very well. It is controversial to put them over the Fusion, but I think they're more versatile than the Fusion, and I think they've got more bases covered than the Fusion. That's what I would say. So, in 4th we have the Gladiators, Birdring, Kevster, and Mirror. Mirror, you know, he's been great. Kevster is incredibly flexible. Like, he's known as the Western Prophet. He is incredibly flexible, Kevster, and it's incredible to have a player that flexible on your roster. And I still think we are yet to see the best from Kevster, and I think this could be a season where he really does break through. And then we have Birdring. I mean, Birdring. Great hit scan player. Still one of the better hit scan players in the league. Maybe not the best anymore, but obviously you can go back to his original inaugural season days when Birdwing was an incredible player for London Spitfire. And he's still got that in him. And he's a nice, reliable long-range hit scan for the Gladiators. I think Birdwing will be good for them. A pairing of Birdwing and Kevster in the DPS lineup looks really good. I think it's an impressive DPS lineup for the Gladiators, and it's why they haven't fiddled with it too much in this off-season. They haven't touched the DPS at all. It's been the tanks and the supports that they've touched, and I don't think there's any need to change them. I got there in the end. Anyway, moving on to the top 3. Third, we have the Seoul Dynasty. Seoul Dynasty are incredibly well-rounded. Like, they were good last season with their DPS. Their DPS, it's only 3 now, but it's Fitz, Prophet, and Sabiolbi. Like, that is great. Fitz and Prophet have looked fantastic. Prophet, argument for GOAT of Overwatch League. Argument for greatest of all time. Like, he's incredibly flexible, pops off on whatever you put him on. And if he starts off a little bit iffy on a hero, he learns them, he grinds them, he gets good. He started off rough on the Echo, got good. And that's what you want in a fantastic player. Prophet is incredibly flexible, one of the best players, if not the best player in the league. Like, he's crazy. Fitz, really improved. Really improved from what he used to be to what he is now. I think Fitz has really blossomed now at Seoul Dynasty. And then you bring in a leadership figure like Sabiolbi, who still has a great Tracer and Sombra and things like that. So if you want to play if you can put Prophet on the Tracer for something, like if you want to put Prophet on a Genji or something like that, or the Pharah, and you want to play, and there was a meta that came in that was like a Pharah Tracer or a Genji Tracer or a Sombra Genji or something like that, then Sabiolbi Prophet could be yet another very powerful DPS line. But was also seeing the Fitz Sombra, which has been really good as well. One iffy thing with the Seoul Dynasty, whenever Prophet has been subbed out, they have looked unstable. Especially in the next cup, I believe they lost every map they subbed Prophet out. So that's something that is a coaching thing though. When you look at the 3 DPS players at the Seoul Dynasty, they are stacked. Absolutely stacked, and I think only bettered by the 2 teams above them. In number 2, we have the Shanghai Dragons. Shanghai Dragons, they kept Lip and Flatter, one of the best DPS duos from 2020, unarguably. Then they re-signed DM, one of the best raw hit scan players you can get. He may not be right up there with the Carpe in a game situation, but when you put him in a 1v1 situation, the Widowmaker, DM's going to win that. And he's demonstrated that in the Widow 1v1s. He's the best raw aimer possibly in the league. So that's great for Shanghai Dragons. And then they go and add Erster. Erster flex DPS from the Atlanta Reign. Did really good at the early days of his Atlanta Reign career. Then it dropped off, mainly due to coaching at the Atlanta Reign in my opinion. And so I think he can really find himself again at the Shanghai Dragons under Moon. And this gives Shanghai Dragons 4 DPS that are incredibly good. Incredibly good. Fletter is your MVP from last year. Fletter is really flexible. He's got hit scan and flex DPS, projectile DPS in him. Lip has got a fantastic Sombra. He is one of the best Sombras in the world. Erster is a fantastic flex DPS. Great Genji. DM, one of the best Widowmakers around. And also has got a great Ashe and a great McCree. I think Shanghai are possibly the best well-rounded team in terms of DPS in the league. And I think that's going to see them to a very good season. Especially off the back of their other signings as well. The only issue with Shanghai Dragons is the support. We've been through that already. But at number 1, again, we do have the San Francisco Shock. Now, there is an argument to put the Dragons over the Shock. And I wouldn't go against that. However, Glister. Yes, they've lost Arns. And I think a lot of people see that as a loss. Like, the people compare Glister and Arns and they're like, oh, hold on, Shock have downgraded here. I don't believe that. Glister is a longer term pick for the Shock here. They're going to develop Glister. Glister wasn't a bad team last season with London Spitfire, but he was still a fantastic player. Definitely a standout player for that London Spitfire side and deserved a chance to show himself in a fantastic team. I think Glister has the potential to push on this season and be an MVP candidate. Obviously it will depend on meta, but I think Glister has the potential to be an incredible player. And I think that's why Shock have picked him up. Nero comes in, flex DPS, replacement for Ivy. Nero, he got dealt a bad time of it at the Guangzhou Charge last season because of visa issues, but previous to that, Nero has been one of the best looking Western flex DPS in the league. And if he can regain that form at the San Francisco Shock, he will be one of the best flex DPSs in the league. And that'll be fantastic. That'll be absolutely crazy. Shock held on to Striker. Striker, one of the best tracers in the league. Great hit scan. Striker is a fantastic player. And again, was in argument for one of the best DPS in the league last season. Striker, you cannot argue with him. Yes, there's San Francisco Shock. And there's also Tayo, who's obviously, I would say he's more of a Genji specialist. I don't expect Tayo to get much playtime for the San Francisco Shock this season when he's competing against Glister, Nero, and Striker. But I still think this is incredibly stacked. I think they have a higher skill ceiling than a lot of teams. And that's why they're getting put at number 1. When you compare them to last year, people will make the argument that they are worse. Striker, Nero, Glister versus obviously Arms, Striker, and Rascal. Now, I think with the right coaching, Nero can be on the level of Rascal. I really do. He can be the Western Rascal, or the Western Prophet. It'll be interesting to see quite how Krusty does it, but I do think there is a lot of potential in his San Francisco Shock DPS. The incredible potential. Between Glister and Nero, the 2 additions they've made, not only are they incredibly rawly talented, but they're also younger, future-proof for San Francisco Shock. I think there is a lot of potential in the Shock's DPS. More potential to go further than the Shanghai Dragons, because you're looking at players that have been around longer and are perhaps coming near the end of their careers, whereas San Francisco Shock are going on further. But if we're talking about this season, wholly and solely, the Shock and the Dragons, they're going to be competing in different regions, but on a pure DPS versus DPS level, I think they are so evenly matched. It is going to be incredible. It's going to be incredible, but I do give the Shock the slight edge. The slight edge because of the higher skill ceiling I believe they have. But it's going to be super, super interesting. It's very close. I think it's definitely the closest role for the Shock compared to other people. And it's going to be interesting. Very, very interesting. And if there's anywhere the Shock could be dethroned, I think it could be the DPS, funnily enough. I think I think the teams are closer. I really, really do. But again, this is all my opinion. And I'm very interested to see what you guys think. I know people are going to have some very interesting takes on this. And I know people are going to argue with me. It always does happen, but that's the nature of power rankings, and we all give our own opinions. Anyway, this has been a really long one. I'm not gonna keep you guys any longer. All the socials are linked in the video description as ever. My Twitter handle is actually updated. It's ILN Danconia now. So do be aware of that. Also, all the Allegiance stuff is linked below as well. I think that's all I needed to say. I'm gonna let you guys go. So for now, thank you guys so much for this video. If you'd like to give a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.